When we are writing React components, it is very common that we'll use helper CSS classes across our app. These helper classes include spacing helpers like styling the margin and padding, or flex helpers for us to easily configure flexbox, typography helper for us to style the font, color helper, so on and so forth. Although it's possible for us to write our own CSS helper classes, however, it is simply not practical in a lot of projects. Why? Because writing CSS classes from scratch requires a lot of time and effort, and in a lot of times, we're not using the industry's best practices. In other words, we are reinventing the wheels and we're making a shabby wheel. If you have used CSS libraries like Bootstrap, Bulma, or WindiCSS before, you appreciate how easy it is to write UI components. Now, among all the CSS libraries out there in the wild, I'm choosing WindiCSS for this project. If you have used Tailwind CSS before, WindiCSS will feel just like home. The reason why I choose WindiCSS is because it is blazingly fast, contains almost every convenient helper classes that you can imagine, generates CSS file on demand, and that means it will only pack in the actual CSS classes that we are using in our final CSS, rather than loading the whole library from the very beginning. On top of that, it has seamless integration with Vite and also has an amazing VS Code extension. I didn't really want to use a component-based library like Bootstrap or Bulma or Material UI because they can be hard to customize. WindiCSS offers a much more flexible API and it's very good if you want a highly customized web page. Anyway, let's go to the documentation and learn how we can install WindiCSS in our project. Let's go to the installation section and we'll click on Vite. If you're using the other build tool, feel free to choose the corresponding option. Next, let's copy the npm install command into our terminal to install the required dependencies. Once we're done, we need to set up our viteconfig.js to load the WindiCSS plugin. Just copy and paste the configuration as defined in the installations page. The last step will be loading the virtual WindiCSS file in our app. We'll copy the import and paste it inside our main JSX file. And that's it. WindiCSS and Vite will take care of the rest for us. They will only include the CSS classes that we actually use in our code. So the final CSS file that we're going to bundle into the production build is actually very lean and optimized. Now the next step is for us to install the extension for VS Code so we can get WindiCSS classes auto-completion. Simply go to the extension tab and search for WindiCSS and install the WindiCSS IntelliSense VS Code extension. Once you have got that, you should now have superpowers. Let's give it a go. We'll go to our app.jsx and give our heading a background color of red. You can see here in the autocomplete, we can see a nice list of WindiCSS classes. Let's run our app and see if that works. And there you go. You should see something like this. So try to play around with WindiCSS and we'll continue in the next lesson. Key takeaways for this lesson: WindiCSS is a utility-based CSS library. It contains a bunch of helper classes for us to use across our app. WindiCSS will generate the production CSS bundle on demand. In other words, it will only include the CSS that we actually use in our code. That's it for now, and I'll see you again in the next lesson. If you enjoyed the content of this video, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and the bell icon for more content to come. It will really help me out. Thanks for the support.